Hello and welcome to season 10 of the Meaning Movement podcast. If you're watching this, if you're hearing my voice, this is the culmination of a ton of work that my team and I have been doing over the past few months to get ready, to get prepared to 4X our production with this podcast. You may have heard me talk about before how important the Meaning Movement is to me personally and how much I've wanted to see it to go to new places, and how I'm kind of just throwing everything at the wall, see what sticks, and kind of blowing it up to see what's going to happen. And this episode and this season of the next couple of months of doing 2 episodes per week is a piece of that process for me. So I'm so excited to be here with you, to be doing this together. So welcome to season 10. Teresa Mitrovic is a leadership learning consultant and creator of a framework for increasing organizational performance via psychological safety. Now, those are a lot of big and maybe somewhat abstract words, but what it means is that she helps organizations do what they do better by improving the culture and the way that the team members relate to each other, to create a safe space where they can take risks, where they can voice concerns, voice ideas, basically to make the team a better team to be a member of. She is the author of the book, The Currency of Connection: How Trust Transforms Life, Relationships, and Work, and also the co-founder of Oro Collective. In our conversation, we hear some of her career journey through leadership roles at Hasbro, to the Walt Disney Company and Universal Pictures, and eventually her transition to doing what she does now. I just had a blast with Teresa. Her work runs parallel to mine in so many ways. It was one of those conversations I feel it could have gone on all day if we had had the time. So let's get right into it. This, of course, is the Meaning Movement podcast. This is a show about work worth doing. So if you're looking to level up your life, your income, and your career, you're in the right place. Today with guest Teresa Mitrovic. Stay with us. This episode, like all episodes of the Meaning Movement podcast, is made possible by the Calling Course. I just want to say, what do I mean by that when I say made possible? It sounds like something that they say in Sesame Street at the beginning or the end. My kids love Sesame Street. What I mean by that is this is a bootstrapped project. I have a course called the Calling Course. It's what I consider the cornerstone or flagship offering of the Meaning Movement. That course is all about work, all about purpose, all about navigating this space of these questions of who am I? What is my life about? Where am I going? What's my contribution going to be? Whether that's right now, in the future, whatever it might be. This podcast has expenses. We pay for those expenses via sales of that Calling Course, also through sponsorships. Share a little bit more about in just a moment. But I wanted to just, instead of talking about the Calling Course here today, wanted to share some words from a recent member of the course. This is Ryan. He sent this over and gave me permission to share this with you. So I'm going to read from him his thoughts on being a part of the Calling Course. He says, discovering more of who I am and how that connects to the world in work is an overwhelming process. It can be hard to know where to start and easy to feel stuck. The Meaning Movement has been a great acceleration, affirmation, and help in this to me. The Calling Course specifically offered new perspectives and a deeper invitation into who I am and how I can walk the path to becoming my fullest self, connected to others in a mission through work. I love that so much. The combination of material, questions, and direct coaching through Q&A is powerful. I recommend it to anyone doing the hard work of walking deeper into their call. First, thank you so much, Ryan, for those words. They are just so fantastic, and I couldn't have said it better myself, which is why I'm reading them here. If you're listening or watching and you want to know more about the Calling Course, the course I open up for enrollment periodically. I don't have a set schedule at this time, but the best way to know when it's going to be the next enrollment period is going to be opening is for you to be on the email list. You can get on the email list anywhere at themeaningmovement.com. You'll find a bunch of subscribe boxes around the site, or go to the Calling Course, thecallingcourse.com. There is a free mini course. It gives just a small taste of what the calling course is all about. If you join that mini course, you'll be sure to be on the list for our next enrollment. So if any of that sounds exciting and enticing to you, make sure to jump on the email list, and then you'll be notified when that next enrollment period opens. I just want to take a quick moment to talk about sponsorship. I've always said that this podcast, this endeavor is made possible by the calling course. What that means is it's self-funded, it's bootstrapped, but we are opening the door to sponsors to come alongside us if they're a good fit for our audience. So if you have a business, a service, or work for someone who does, that would like to get in front of an audience like ours, shoot us an email at podcast@themeaningmovement.com. We can tell you more about what we have to offer by way of our audience and sponsorship opportunities, and we can take the conversation from there. Podcast@themeaningmovement.com. Thanks so much. Teresa, welcome to the Meaning Movement Podcast. I am so excited to have you here with us. Welcome aboard.
Thanks, Dan. It's so great to be here with you this morning.
The question that I love to begin with is, how do you begin to talk about the work that you do?
So the first thing I say to people when they ask me what I do is I say that I help leaders get the outcomes that they're looking for, but at the same time creating a culture that they can be really proud of leading. Because I find that often when you're really ambitious and you're going after performance outcomes, it's really easy to forget about the people. And when you forget about people, they start to feel commoditized. And so then ultimately over time, it gets harder and harder to keep reaching those same performance levels. And I know that from having been a leader. So I'm really careful to say, look, I help leaders get the performance that they're looking for while creating a culture they can be really proud of leading, feel really good about, because leaders don't want to be these kind of hard carrot and stick types anymore, right? Leaders, like we all grew up with command and control as a leadership style that we were reporting into more often than not. And in this day and age, everyone, particularly when we're working hybrid or remote, leaders really want to understand how to do this differently, but there's not a lot of people out there showing us.
Yes, so I love that.
Yeah.
And tell me just break it down a little bit for me. Like what kind of, I want to say what manifestations, what avenues, what channels does that look like as far as you doing that work with people?
Okay. So in terms of the practicalities of how I do the work, I do it through coaching and online courses and online facilitation. So I'm 100% virtual. So when we talk about finding meaning and doing the work in a way that works for us, I'm 100% virtual because that's how it works for me. And that's how I'm able to give the most to the people that I work with. But in terms of how I help leaders to create the space to create essentially psychologically safe performance. So that's what I focus on. It's about helping them to understand how psychologically safe performance happens. And essentially all it is human performance. So we look at 3 different aspects. So what I do, so I created this model called the psychologically safe performance model. And if you imagine a pyramid with performance at the apex at the top, and then psychological safety bottom left and trust bottom right, then then we start with psychological safety. So I help leaders to understand psych safety. Then we look at trust, because the degree to which you feel psychologically safe then determines the level to which you trust the people around you, the environment and the leader. So the safer you feel, the more you trust, the more you lean in, the more you volunteer and open up. And that then becomes a straight line into this really rich, sustainable performance. So, I love it. So that's kind of, that's the basis of the model. And then within that, we've got 4 other little triangles that sit inside of that model. We've got self, which is bottom left-hand corner, team, which is bottom right-hand corner, system, which is right at the top under performance, and leader sits right in the center. So helping leaders to understand that they are the center, they're the beating heart of this model, because they can influence self, team, and they can also protect their team members and their team from the systemic kind of downflow, but they can also have an influence upwards on that system as well. So, but they are they're really the center. So I help them understand those 2 different levels. Yeah.
I love it. And just for listeners, since it is a little bit visual, let's go over it again. The top is psychological safety,
top
right?
Top is performance.
No, performance, sorry.
Performance, performance at the top. I'm going to do this in reverse since you're looking. So performance at the top, psych safety, bottom left, trust, bottom right. So if you think of it like, psych safety and trust is like your new bottom line, right? That's your human bottom line.
Got it.
Because humans only, so we talk about humans having two different operating models, right? We're either in connect mode or we're in protect mode. If we're in protect mode, then we move into trust. Sorry, if we're in connect mode, we move into trust, because we are starting to actually feel connected to the environment, the leader, the team, the outcomes that we're looking for. So we're connected to this bigger purpose, right? So when you and I talk about creating meaning in work, that's how you're helping people. So from a leadership perspective, when you're thinking about psych safety, it's not your role as a leader to create psychological safety. You create the conditions where people understand that they are valued and that they contribute value.
I love it.
When you do that, then they trust more. And then, so as a leader, your job is to keep fostering that trust piece, and then the performance comes. So yeah, so it's psych safety first, then trust, and then performance. And
it really helps me visualize it as the floor, right? And you're building on the floor.
And think of it like this. Yeah, so if you think of psych safety and trust as your new bottom line, and also then being the load-bearing
the walls,
support beams that hold up performance. So without them, performance is always an uphill battle. But with them, performance everything flows up.
Yes, I love it. This is fantastic. I want to get way more into that. But before we do, I want to know, how did you get into this? Where did this come from in your, like, I love this model. I want to know, how you came up with it. Where did this emerge in your journey?
So the model, I literally woke up one morning, like at 3:00 in the morning, one morning in January this year, and was like, oh, I finally get it, because I have literally spent 10 years. I've spent 10 years, 11 years doing this work with people internationally. And I've always talked about high-performing how you create high-performing teams as a leader, or how you take an underperforming or a slightly dysfunctional team and turn them around so that you create this incredible kind of performance dynamic.
Yeah.
But always I was talking to leaders about the importance of psych safety and trust. And there was always I always felt like I had to sneak it in under the radar. So I was trying to find a simpler way to explain it to people.
Yep.
And it was, the more I thought about it, the harder it was to try to conceptualize. But when I just left it to my reticular activating device, right, and woke up one morning.
Yes.
But the other part of this is that I was one of those leaders way back when I was head of marketing at Hasbro in New Zealand. I was one of these leaders who was like, and some of the listeners might recognize themselves in this. I was always busy. I never had enough time. I was working long hours. I always felt like I had to cover everything that the team weren't thinking about. If there was something that had to be done, it was often easier for me to do it rather than delegate it or teach people how to do it. And our boss, our GM, sent the entire senior management team on a Coaching as Manager course, and I was so annoyed about it because I thought it was such a flagrant waste of time, and I just didn't have time. And I was a single parent at the time, and I was like, oh, I don't have time to spend. So I spent 3 days off-site learning this stuff, and I was so annoyed. But I came back to work, and I felt like I do trust her. She was one of the best managers I've had, right? So in terms of allowing you to understand the value that you're creating and how valued you are, she was amazing. And so I trusted her. So I put some of this into practice. And if I tell you that I went from being this really, I'm going to say it, I was a really A-type character, right? I wasn't narcissistic, I wasn't brutal, but I had really high standards. We'll make no mistake about it. I was raised by a Croatian guy, and a very loving mum, but this Croatian dude who's like, there is only perfection, there is nothing beneath, And so I had this really A-type approach. But when I started putting some of these very simple things into practice, things lifted. Like within the first month, 6 weeks, things were really dramatically changing. And in 9 months, not only had we shaved between an hour and a half and 2 hours off of our work days as a team, the quality of work had improved, and we also tripled our profit. And that was enough for me to go, holy moly, what? And the morale on the team was amazing. And my job as a leader was so much simpler and so much easier and so much more fun, right? So that was the first time I really experienced this deep sense of meaning and connection to my team as a leader. And I was like, I almost missed all of that because I was so stuck on, I know what I'm doing, I know how to do it, I've got it covered, that I almost missed this incredible opportunity to change my life and the lives of people in it. But it took me, there was a long time between then and retraining in London to then setting up my own business. So it was with me, and I was thinking, as soon as my son's old enough or the mortgage is paid, whatever comes first, or before I turn 40, I'm retraining and I'm going to do this full time and help people like me to discover this stuff, because it doesn't just change who we are and how we are at work. It changes what happens in the rest of our lives as well, because we spend so much time at work, right? It can't help but have knock-on impact outside of work.
Well, and who you are
at work is who you are, right? Like you're not a different person, as much as we like to try to separate it and be your quote unquote professional, like, and I feel like, and maybe partly because of work from home and everything, but I feel like that the separation is breaking down, I think in a really positive way, so that you can be more human, at work, bring more of your feelings to the table. Because that's what we're talking about, right? Like that's what trust and connection is about.
And the people kind of get it. People get nervous about emotion at work, but the thing is, we want passion and commitment and energy at work, and those are they come from an emotional place, right? So it's not the emotion that people. It's not the emotion we're trying to stop. It's the maladaptive expression of emotion, I guess. So because we want people to bring their emotions. If someone's not happy at work, if someone sees an issue that hasn't been addressed, it's better to have that out in the open than to have them put a lid on it, right? So
because then it leaks out and it's gross.
it leaks out and it splashes over everybody. Do you know what I mean? It's ugly. So the best thing as a leader that you can do is go, actually, emotion is what we want, but what we need to do is figure out how to take it from this kind of a state where that emotion becomes emotionally tense, like we're looking for that kind of, we're looking to turn that tension into, rather than it being kind of an emotional tension, we want it to become a creative tension. So we want to harness that emotion and convert it into something that can actually be fuel for us to become better, stronger, more robust, and to understand each other better as a team. Because the more we understand how each other works well, the more we can create those environments collectively for each other and unlock greatness,
Yes. So just to focus a little bit more on this, that experience when you're, head of marketing, was that change that took place, was it directly correlated to that retreat experience that you didn't want to participate
in? I'm really embarrassed to say it was directly correlated to that. Yeah. And I have to tell you, I don't know how many of the actual tools and processes that they kind of taught us around I actually took on board. But what I did do was, so I can tell you, I can break it down for you. I can tell you that all I did essentially was create a greater clarity for the team with a longer window of visibility, right? So greater clarity around what it is we're going for, why it matters strategically for the business longer term, and also why it matters that you guys are doing it and how you each add value collectively as a team. So here is what you guys are doing as a team that none of you can do on your own. And here is why each of you matter in doing your role. So my job as a leader is to help you guys, is to focus you guys by saying, here's what we're looking for. And here are the guardrails as well, right? So here are the things that you must be aware of, because outside of this space, we're either wasting money, wasting time, wasting energy, or potentially incurring some kind of risk or harm. But inside of that, fill your boots. And so it was that, giving them that level of clarity, and then creating this pace, this cadence where every week we would catch up as a team on the Monday, and then on the Wednesday we'd do one-to-ones. And those touch points to connect with people individually and say, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing? Like, where are things not going well, and why is that happening? Is it coming from a place of ability, or is it coming from a place of motivation? And how do I help you address that? So starting to see my role as a leader as understanding what was required, and then creating the conditions and supporting the team to get there.
I love it.
And then in the team meetings, it became about facilitating the team dynamic as well as overseeing the work. And and you know what? When you do all those things, accountability becomes so much easier, because you're holding people accountable to a standard that they have set themselves. And you're holding them accountable in a way that says, I know that you can do better, and I'm here to help you. Tell me how I can help you best right now around this particular thing. So you get that specificity, that precision, and and you kind of always, you're building in and you're reassuring consistently over time that you've got their back, that they're not going to fail on your watch. And the caveat is you can only do that when you've hired people that you do believe in and who you want to support to grow. So if you don't have people who have the right attitude on the team, and that does get harder, obviously, but really that's all I did. And so, it's really about doing that consistently over time. And the results were remarkable, absolutely remarkable. So that's what I try to help other leaders do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it makes so much sense that you had such a transformational experience facilitated by, an outside entity, party, coach, whoever. And like that would be such a palpable moment in your career to that you want to be a part of doing that, offering that to other people. It just
Yeah.
makes so much sense. I could see how this work is just really rich and meaningful for you because of that
Yeah.
experience.
Well, do you know what registered for me as well for the first time, I think, in this conversation is I would never have, I would have declined going on that course. I would have fought it if she'd been a different kind
Yeah.
of a manager herself.
Mm.
If my boss had been
Yeah.
a different kind of a manager, if I hadn't have respected her and trusted her the way
Mm.
that I did, I would have fought really hard, and I could have won because she would have let me
Yeah.
because she
Yeah.
believed in me, right? So,
Yes.
but yeah, it's,
That's beautiful.
you know, yeah. So there are times when we have to trust other people sometimes, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to show us the direction that we need to go in, and
Yeah.
just give them the benefit of the doubt and just give it a try, because it was a game changer, and it's changed my life in terms of the course, the direction of the work that I do.
Yeah.
But I know that it's changed the lives of the people that were on that team as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it just sounds like you had a great manager. Like,
She was
it feels like
amazing.
such a rare and beautiful thing to be able to say, like, that person led so well and like changed me as a result. Like, that's so cool. And
It's
yeah,
incredible. It was the biggest gift
I
she
hope
ever
she
could have
knows
given.
that, right? Yeah.
I'll be
I hope
dropping her
you've
another
told her
note
that.
after this. I have, yeah.
Yes.
I did tell her that if I bumped into her in New Zealand several years ago, and I said to her, "Hey, you
Yeah.
changed the course of my life." And
That's so cool.
but yeah, I'm gonna have to
That's
drop
wonderful.
her another note. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, I also think, and I have 3 kids, 6.5 and under, and
Wow.
I hear my other friends. Yeah, wow, we could just stop right there and just like
Yeah. All of the conversation. Yeah.
I'm gonna take a nap for a little while. But so my friends who are parents will say, there's a saying about parenting books, like whether or not they actually help. But what we do know, that what the data shows, is that the parents who read parenting books are better parents. But what we don't know is if it's because of the books or because they're actually trying to improve,
and they care.
And
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
There's the
that's what I'm
attitude
kind of
there.
going through my head, even as you maybe were invited by your manager to go to this thing and take part of this transformational journey. Like, even just by saying yes to that, whether or not the actual content of that, retreat or whatever it was, like, is one for one the content that you put into practice with your team, she was inviting you to become a new person and a new leader, and that's what matters. And that's, at least that's how I interpret
so
your
true.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's 100% accurate.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just, I'm curious just to rewind, just to zoom out a little bit more before we zoom in again. So, like, head of marketing at Hasbro, like, was marketing kind of your trajectory? Was that kind of your end goal? Like, maybe narrate a little bit more of your career. Yeah. I'd love to hear a little bit more of like the twists and turns that got you there before we talk about, what's happened since.
Yeah. Sure. So, look, honestly, when I started out studying, I was studying psychology. I wanted a psychology degree. But I was a young parent. I was a very young parent, right? So I became a parent when I was 17 years old. And my first thought was, I've got to provide for this young man, like, so I went to university, got a degree. And it just so happened that marketing was one that just, so I started out doing psychology. It was hardcore with a newborn. So then I switched to marketing, which was less hardcore, but still about humans and behavior and whatnot. And then kind of just got into marketing, just started my career trajectory. And it was actually that particular manager who was amazing, who put me on the coaching course. It was her that said to me, when she offered me the head of marketing role at Hasbro, she said to me, she offered it to me and I said no, because I was going through a divorce at the time. And she said, if you don't take it, you'll have to train the person who does. And I remember saying to her, fine, okay, I may as well do it then. And because she knew that would get a rise out of me and that I would say yes, right? So that was amazing. So I did that for 3.5 years as well, and it was an incredible job. It's hard when you've had great internet, when you fly into New York for toy fairs, and you've got international travel, and it's really hard to move from that job into another job that feels as exciting. Yes. But I was ready for it. I knew that if I didn't move, I'd become a lifer, and that's really common at Hasbro because it's a great company to work for. So I did a sideways stint at a boutique sales and marketing recruitment firm, and that was really interesting to understand people's needs and people showing up. So, and you're talking about meaning at work, right? Hearing people talk about their careers and what they were looking for and what they wanted, and then trying to help the employer and these hiring managers get great stuff. So that was a really interesting window into the choices that people make and how leaders set their team members up and how people are thinking about building their career, because our career is such a big part of how we live our life, right? So that was fascinating, but ultimately not for me because it felt really transactional still. And then I got a country manager role with Disney. So what was really interesting about that? So that was in New Zealand, and it was largely a relationship-based role. So the skills that I'd learned in that coaching course, where it was all about empowering others and finding the route to success, helped me tremendously in my role at Walt Disney. So we turned that business around in 18 months. And I had, like, if I tell you that I had like $20,000 US, that was my budget annually to spend. So I literally had like not much money to spend, but I built relationships and I just kept, breaking down walls, building relationships. And when we started working together as like one team, so we had competitors working together for the greater good of the business and their collective Disney business. And so that was a remarkable thing to learn as well. Did that for 2.5 years, and then we relocated. I married my husband. We relocated to London, and that was when I thought, what, if I get back into a full-time role, I'm never going to get out because the golden handcuffs are too good, right? So I took a contract role at Universal Pictures in London, and that was another incredible role where I met another wonderful, wonderful leader as well, and did that so they kept extending my contract, and it got to a point where my 40th birthday was coming up, and I was like, hey, this is one of the deadlines. I've got to stop and retrain. And so I did. But that was an amazing, it was an incredible opportunity again to just kind of keep building and growing and nurturing relationships, but in service of the greater good for all of us, which is, for businesses, it is about money. It is about, making sure that the lights are kept on, that people are employed, but also having fun while you do it, rather than it feeling like a grind, is to be able to do that is a real joy. So I retrained in London, got a couple of coaching diplomas, got halfway through a third coaching diploma, got distinctions, did more additional training, and then just went out there and started and got my first organizational client, and I was away. And so, did that for 5 years in London, moved back to New Zealand for 2.5 years. And then we moved across to Melbourne. We've been here 3 years now as well. So
cool. Love it.
But I pivoted. The Oro Collective is the latest iteration of this business. And I took the opportunity, and you talked earlier about the slight gift in the pandemic. You didn't quite put it that way, but I'm just going to call it that. I think the pandemic's taken so much from us that we should take back the bits that work for us, right? Yes. And for me, what worked for me is I had these amazing clients in London. I had clients in London who've moved overseas. I had great clients in NZ. The pandemic has meant that now that everyone's comfortable using Zoom and being online, I can actually run my business online and work with clients around the world. So that's been a real gift for me.
Oh, great.
But also being able to say, okay, now I can focus on, I don't have to talk about performance and come in the back door with psych safety and trust. I can actually go, hey, guys, we need psych safety and trust. And we need to understand this as leaders, not just for the good of our team and our business, but for our own good as leaders as well, because our roles stop being meaningful when it just becomes about the money and the outcomes. The meaning comes through adding value, being of service, doing things that are valued, appreciated, acknowledged, necessary,
Yeah.
And money isn't a great metric of that. But other people are.
I love it. So great. Thank you for the overview. It helps to connect the dots. I was going to ask which happened first, the mortgage being paid off or your son growing up.
And my 40th birthday.
I just had mine about a month ago. So
oh wow! Congratulations.
Thank you. It changes things when it's like, oh wow, like life is going by. It's been really interesting just to be like, wow, time feels like it's speeding up, and I don't know. It just it has reframed a lot of things in surprising ways, in ways that other birthdays for me haven't.
There is something about 40. It's interesting, right? I just turned 50 this year, and there was this moment. Thanks. Yeah, I thought I'd be horrified. I was actually really excited about it. I don't know. I think it feels liberating sometimes when you hit a benchmark and you're like, wow, I'm going to have fun with this. And so that's what.
That's such a good attitude.
Like, yeah.
I love it.
Wow, so that'll tears, right? So what you going to do?
Yes, exactly. So good. I'm curious about taking retraining is the word that you've been using. And
Mm-hmm.
how much did you have planned out going into that, of like, this is that psychological safety, that piece in particular, or is it just like, I want to be a part of this change that I've experienced, and this is an avenue through which to do it? Like, maybe just narrate a little
Yeah.
bit of what your thought process was through that transition.
So it wasn't, it was almost instinctive before it became codified.
Yeah,
So
it's often
in fact,
how it
it
is,
wasn't
right?
almost, it was. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is, right? Like
yeah,
you follow your nose and your nose takes you in this
yes.
direction. So I was constantly going performance, but also relationships and trust. And it always felt like it was a little bit hard to, and I think as leaders, we can understand that, right? Because you do want both, but trying to merge them feels really difficult. It feels like oil and water, right? They just they don't mix. And
Yeah.
so I was constantly trying. So the reason why psych safety mattered and trust mattered so much to me is because I think through Hasbro, Disney, and Universal, it was the relationships that helped me amplify what I was able to achieve. So I didn't want to have to give them up. I
Yeah.
not only because it was much more fun and much more enjoyable, meaningful, satisfying for me to work that way,
Yeah.
but also because it made performance so much easier. So if you didn't have great relationships, it constantly felt like a battle and a struggle. So my challenge was, how do you figure that out? And
Yeah.
and the interesting thing for me is that I can't, my background, I've got a really close relationship with trauma and adversity. So I've had a lot of it through my life.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think, we talk these days about being trauma informed, but I think so I always talked about performance and trust. Psychological safety has always been really interesting to me because of the fact that that's more the internal assessment and the internal
Yeah.
kind of dynamic that we're dealing with, right? That is based around who we are and how we have lived our lives to date. And so that's such a complex and nuanced piece. So that piece only came in, I think, as I started to age and as I became more seasoned in the business, I started thinking, you know what, this is really important, and I've got to find a way to do it that is trauma informed, sensitive, really kind of delicate. Because I was doing a lot of
Yeah.
work in big organizations, big corporate organizations where
Yeah.
they don't really want to think about all that messy stuff like emotions and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Uh-huh.
So it was really, I guess that's another gift that the pandemic's given me, is now
Yeah.
a lot of people are talking about psychological safety and the importance of actually making sure that people aren't stuck on protect mode, which is survival mode, right? And a lot of people are still feeling the shadows, or still being haunted by that sense of having to focus on survival first. So
Yeah.
it wasn't ever a plan. I think the plan loosely was performance and trust because I valued both. I just didn't know how I was going to get there in a way that would actually really synthesize the learnings. And I didn't want to have to give up either. I didn't want it to be an either or. I wanted it to be an and, or both,
Yes. Yes.
And as I say, it was just this moment of serendipity, waking up in the middle of the night one day and going, oh my goodness, I can see it. And I had to get out of bed and write it down before I sketch it before
So
I
great.
lost it, because
Yeah.
those moments of brilliance are rare, right? So
Yes.
they offer
Yes. I
me
love it.
anyway.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Likewise. Likewise. I'm curious. You talk about leaders. How do you define leaders? Like, who, when you're talking about the leaders that you're working with, who are you talking about? And maybe for listeners, like, they might be asking,
Sure.
is this me or is it not me?
So when I'm talking about leaders, the kind of leaders that I work with, or when people are coming to me and saying, this is the kind of thing that I need, it's
Yeah.
probably different to how I would describe leaders, because the way I define leaders is anyone who's having an impact on more than one person. So parents are leaders, teachers are leaders, ward sisters are leaders. So anyone who is responsible for overseeing something and making sure that there is security, that there are outcomes, and they also have influence over others, they are technically leaders. The leaders I tend to work with are people who have a team whose work relies on them being able to think and act and emote in a thoughtful way, or constructively. So if you're a leader whose people are working in the knowledge economy first and foremost, then those and you want to figure out how to make performance easier, or how to create a really great culture, or that actually the team the team have been through some rough times and they could do with a little bit of self-care, and you want to be able to give them that kind of the environment that feels like it's fun and it's enjoyable to come to work, whether they're coming to work at a desk at home or whether they're coming to work in the office. But if you want to give them an environment where they feel like they matter, but you also want to get the results, then that's the kind of leader that I work with. And it's really important that, because again, it comes back to attitude, right? Because I could stand in a room and have stood in a room with 200 people and talked about this stuff before. And you know that a third of people are going to get it, want to do more. A third of people are going to be ambivalent. And a third of people are going to go, well, that's just ridiculous. And we just need to focus on performance. It doesn't matter. If people don't like it, they'll leave,
Yes.
And so, the leaders that I work with are all people who are like, we've got the technical stuff down pat. We know what we're doing. We're really skilled at this. Performance is good, but we think it could be better. Our people are starting to feel burnt out, because here are the things that we see when trust and psych safety aren't present. People get really burnt out. People aren't speaking up about what they need to make their jobs and their lives easier so that they can contribute more effectively at work. Because it's not just about for a leader, it's about creating the conditions for performance, right? So it's not just about the work that you're doing, but how effective can you be? Because before the pandemic, we had something like 2 hours of productive work every single day, and the rest of it is switching between tasks or taking calls or meeting. And so actually it's thinking about what is the value that you're here to create, and how do you achieve that in whatever way feels good for you, because we've got to acknowledge neurodiversity and different, everyone's got something else going on, and work is one part of life. So if the leaders who are out there who think, we want people to be able to bring the best of themselves to work. We want people to feel like, we want to create a human workspace. We want people to feel engaged and valued and rewarded by what they do. Then building the connection with your people has a stronger impact than increases in salary, as an example. So an increase in trust is, there was one study done several years ago where the researcher discovered that an increase in trust was equivalent to a 10% increase in salaries. And no one's getting 10% increases in salaries right now, So, and that's a thing, right? Because people are so used to being treated like a commodity that they act like a commodity. So when you go to work and you're treated like a valued team member, because what you're doing every day matters, then the way that you show up and the way that you do your work changes, and you start to add more value organically. And so those are the kinds of leaders I work with. Leaders will know if they love performance, but they want their team to stay. They love their team. They want to give something back to their team and let their team, feel really engaged. Then, those are the leaders that I work with.
I love it. For people who might fall into that category, I'm curious what the low-hanging fruit is to increase that trust and to build that connection with your team. Like, where's the first place to start?
The answer is kind of easy and hard, as it always is when you're an adult, right?
Yes.
The easy part is that you can start with yourself, so you don't need to rely on anyone else. You can start by changing the way that you're engaging with your team. The harder part is that you need to be doing this consistently. So what you can do consistently is you can look at the 4 different ways that you are creating trust with your team, and the way, not just in what you are doing, but also what you're endorsing in the team's behaviors as well. So trust is, and I talk about this in the work that I do as well and in my book, but trust is, the easiest way to think about building trust is that you build it through your competence and your character, right? So your character is about how am I connecting and how credible am I? So connection and credibility. Am I building, do people know that I care about them? Or do I just care about the work that they're doing? Are they just a means to an end for me? So getting that piece right. So how are you showing people that you care and that you have their back and that you're invested in their success? Credibility is making sure that you're closing that say-do gap, because as leaders, it's really easy for us to say, "Hey, it's really important that you feel comfortable speaking up and telling us when you've got ideas or concerns or problems." And then when they do, going, "Oh, well, look, we all have that problem right now." Do you know what I mean? So when they take that leap of faith and trust you, you shut them down, and it's human nature, right? It's human nature, and we get tired. So credibility is a really big piece as well. And if you find yourself doing that, and look, I used to do this all the time. I'd internally be rolling my eyes, going, suck it up, but we can't do that, right? And it's not appropriate to say that. And yes, we are all feeling like that, but it doesn't make it any less real for all of us. So what you can do is you can say, tell me more, help me understand what's going on for you, or tell me more about what's happening and why that's a problem. Help me understand how I can help you right now. So just ask questions in those situations. When it comes to our so that's about our character. When it comes to our competence, it's about how capable we are. So how are we demonstrating our capability to the team? And that comes down to things like, are we setting a really clear North Star for them? Are we saying this is what we're here to achieve together as a team or as a business? And here's what we need to be focusing on in the next month, 3 months, 6 months. And here is what let's talk about your contribution to that. Let's talk about why you matter in this team because of the value that you add. So it's about demonstrating your competence and your capability as a leader, and so they know that they can trust you because you know what's coming. You know how, you know the broad brushstrokes of how it needs to happen so that it's successful, not risky. But that you've also got their back and you're going to support them to be successful in that because their success is your success. And then the other piece is consistency. So trying to have as few bad days as you can, so trying to show up often with people. And for the consistency part, it's, it's not, I'm not suggesting stop being human. You actually should be human. So on the days when you're having a bad day, it's okay to say, hey, look, I've got a really tough day today. Is there something that we could park, or do we really need to talk about it? Can you give me 5 minutes just to regroup? So be human, role model what it looks like to be human and measured and kind of composed. Always take it as an opportunity, but always think about how you are demonstrating that consistency. So to focus on those. So as a leader, focus on trust, but focus on from the inside out first. Think about how you're building capability, how you're demonstrating capability, how you're demonstrating consistency, how you're demonstrating connection, and how you're demonstrating credibility with your team. And you can do that in any relationship, right? You can do it with your partner. I can do it with my partner. We can do it with our clients. We can do it with our teams.
I love it. And it sounds like so much of an invitation. I think we've already kind of named this a little bit, but just to be human, right? Instead of pretending that you're not having a bad day, just to say, I'm having a bad day. And, can you cut me a little extra slack? Or I'm only at 75% today. I'm sorry. But we're gonna be back to it tomorrow, or whenever.
Absolutely, because it's real, right? This is what real world looks like. And when you're doing that, when you give yourself the permission to do that, then it lets them know that actually it's genuinely that's deep integrity on your part as a leader, because you're signaling very clearly to your team members that it's okay to be human. And that matters more than you saying it's okay to be human, right? So what matters is not what we say, but what we do and what we encourage and facilitate others to do as well. So it's really important that when we see other people, and that's probably the one thing I would add as well, when you're thinking about how you build trust as a leader, when you see the team members doing any of those things, acknowledging it, naming it and acknowledging it is really important as well, because then you're facilitating and fostering this culture of trust, right? So that's really important as well.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a piece of it that's also just comes back to humility too, that when someone speaks up about their experience and it's negative, sure, you're responsible because you're the leader, but that doesn't but to not let that be feel personal or a critique, or say you're not doing your job well. And I feel like, that's just something that maybe feels like underscoring all of this whole conversation. Like you have to be someone who's willing to acknowledge that you have room to grow.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? None of us are perfect. And I think I made that mistake when I was a leader, of thinking that I knew it all, I had it all, I could just control it all, and when you do that, you leave no space for other people, but also you create a really, really strong rod for your own back. And you need to be able to let go of that and say, actually, if we're all perfect, then there is no space. There is no, it becomes a zero-sum game. And so demonstrating that, and certainly if you want to be able to give your team feedback, you need to be able to take it as well. And the trick to taking feedback and being able to invite it and be okay with hearing it is to know that person wants you to be successful. So if you can see it that way, if you can see it as a gift, and you can always say to people, look, it doesn't feel like that for me. You can always ask questions like, tell me more about, when do you see me doing that? Or how do I, in which circumstances, or which bit? So you can ask questions, but you should always it's hard to give feedback to each other. So the first thing we should always do is acknowledge the difficulty in doing that and speaking up. And then if we don't agree with it, the next thing that we can do is say to people, help me understand more about that. Help me understand when I do it, the kind of context that that's in, because a leader's role is to help create and foster this great environment where people do want to keep turning up, where people do want to keep doing their best work, and where the performance is really sustainably, consistently, reliably high, right? So, and we all, because the environment around us is constantly changing, we need to be prepared to constantly change as well. And so we've got that, and if we think about it from that perspective, we've got to constantly evolve to remain relevant and to survive. So if we think of it like that as leaders, not just human beings, but as leaders, then it allows us to be more open to hearing the feedback when it comes.
I love it. That is so fantastic, and just so in line with, with my work, that I think as humans we are called, to use that word, to always be evolving, changing, to becoming the next iteration of ourselves. And it sounds like that's the same work that you're inviting people to, just in the in the context of their organization and in the context of their leadership, which is just really, really beautiful. Exactly. I love it. Just to kind of zoom out for just another moment here. How do you think about whether it's in your own work, the work that you do yourself, or in the work that you're doing with leaders, how do you think about words like purpose, like calling, like legacy? Like what are the words that you use to really talk about the meaning, the real meaning of the work, and whether it's for you or whether it's with the leaders that you work with?
I talk about meaning a lot, and I talk about legacy a lot. And I do that for two reasons. One is because when you have meaning in your work, life just takes on there's this whole other dimension in life that opens up, right? And I don't think I realized that, if I'm completely honest, I don't think I realized that before I did that coaching course, because up until that point, I'd had a job. And I think after that point, I then felt like I had a calling. And this is the difference, right? I remember a long time ago when I was in London doing this leadership seminar and talking about leaders who do jobs versus leaders who are following their calling, or who are, people who are leaders versus leaders doing a job. You can feel the difference, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So if I could just go back and edit my comment earlier about leaders who want to have not just do a job, but actually leave a legacy. Those are the leaders that I love working with. But
there you go.
But then also, so it's partly about the meaning, right? It's because when you're a leader who understands that there's meaning in what you're doing, how you lead shifts. Like it just automatically shifts. You can't help it. You start to love your job more. You start to see different. You start to see your team differently. You start to see chaos, complexity, conflict as an opportunity, not as a risk. So it's a huge gift to leaders. But I also talk to leaders about legacy a lot as well, because again, legacy makes you think about the impact that you're leaving, and that broadens your horizon. It broadens your thinking beyond the metrics that we would traditionally think of in business into, well, actually, what's the difference that I'm making? Am I creating something here that's bigger than me, or am I just creating a cult of personality here? So, or a fiefdom. So, I talk about legacy, and I think so. And we talk about purpose as well, because purpose is that North Star, right? So when I'm talking to a leader or to a leadership team, if you don't know what the North Star is, then it's like that old saying: if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Yes.
But as soon as when you know your purpose, it filters everything. It makes setting goals, prioritizing, cutting out all the nonsense and the noise much, much easier. So purpose sounds like it's one of these fluffy, idealistic kinds of things, but actually it's a really great tool for simplifying your strategic thinking, your decision-making process. It's a great filter and a great guide.
Yeah, it's so great. So great. This is so fun. I just feel so much, just so much resonance with the work that you do. And so I just really love that you're out there doing it, and just really appreciate you coming on the show and let me pick your brain about all of it. It's just been so fun having you. For folks that want to follow along and connect with you, is there anything in particular you'd like to invite people to?
Yeah, so probably a couple of things. If if what we've been talking about resonates, then I'd love for you to come and connect with me on LinkedIn. But also for people who are listening to this and thinking, wow, I'd like to take a dive into some of this work, then I have created a landing page for your listeners so that they can jump on there. And I've got a nice chunky discount on the Performance Partnership Playbook, which talks through how you can really start to evolve your skills as a leader, so that rather than kind of taking that traditional command and control approach to leadership, you're really partnering your team for optimal performance. So there's a lot of guides in there and a lot of walkthroughs from me around how to make it happen.
Beautiful. I'll make sure to put a link to that in the show notes so people can just click on right on through. And it's been so fun to connect with you. Really hope to stay connected.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy to spend this time with you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you, listeners, viewers, for tuning in. You can find links to Teresa's work at themeaningmovement.com/Teresa. That's Teresa. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. That's how people like you find this show. If you're listening, subscribe wherever you're listening. If there's a place to leave a rating and review, please do so. That's, again, how people like you find this show. This show is all about helping you find more fulfillment, helping you navigate the complicated spaces that we find ourselves in, where we're pulled in multiple directions with competing priorities. If you know anyone who would benefit from these kinds of stories, these kinds of interviews, conversations, I want to ask that you just take a moment and send them this episode or one of your favorite episodes. It would mean the world to me. Our artwork is by Eleazar Ruiz. Our music is by Tom Roram. We'll be back with you in just a short while. Take care.